when I heard it, there was something that spoke to me when I realized that we somehow have impressions of who we think we are, and based on those assumptions, we begin to behave in different ways as if that were true. You know, we are more than we think we are. And the less we think of ourselves, the less is our experience, the less is our demonstration, the less is our manifestation. We have sometimes come into the conclusion that we are not enough. Now that's never clearly articulated in our words, nor is it even articulated in our minds. But I'll tell you what I'm talking about. You know, your identity really, in terms of the definition of identity, has to do with your sameness or your essential or generic character. So you may consider yourself to be someone's daughter, someone's son, someone's sister, someone's brother. You may categorize yourself as being a person of a certain race. You may categorize yourself of being of a certain gender. You may categorize yourself by your astrological sign. You may categorize yourself by your numerology sign. You may categorize yourself in any one of these ways, none of which are the wholeness, none of which is the truth of who you are. These are simply facts, and facts and truth are not always the same. Breathe. Facts and truth are not always the same. You understand that another way to understand what an identity is the distinguishing character or personality of an individual. You may consider yourself to be acting as though you are doing what your mother did, or being how your mother was, or being how your father was, or talking like your father talked. I know it took me a long time to stop talking the way my father talked, because he had a lot of colorful words and I didn't need in my vocabulary, particularly as a minister. But you may categorize yourself as a Baptist, you may categorize yourself as a religious scientist, you may categorize yourself as spiritual but not religious, whatever that means. You may categorize yourself by your theology, you may categorize yourself by your sexuality, you may consider yourself to be straight, you may consider yourself to be gay, you may consider yourself to be these physical attributes or these mental attributes. You may think of yourself as blurred or a blipster. That's a black nerd or a black hipster. Don't understand the lingo here. But you could consider yourself an Afro-punk rocker, or you could consider yourself a black metalhead. Whatever it is, you are not simply the sum total of your music preferences. You are not the sum total of your sexual preferences. You are not the sum total of your religious preferences. You are not the sum total of any distinguishing character. You are not even the sum total of your personality. You know, you have in you a true divine essence. It is the Father's presence that we've been speaking about all month. It is the Father's presence that we've been exploring all month. And in the Father's presence, you have to know that you are this precious, precious expression of it. That in that very moment, even before you were conceived, in that very moment, as the biological process was occurring, in that individual moment, you were cared for and supported. You were absolutely embraced. You are absolutely held in the presence of this divine love. And this divine love saw you as perfect. This divine love saw you as unique. This divine love saw you as beautiful. This divine love saw you as this very tender, fragile, but whole being. This divine love sees you this way now and in each and every moment, regardless of what your behavior may be. This divine love doesn't care whether or not you follow somebody else's Judaic or Mosaic laws about what it means to be holy, or what it means to be right, or what it means to be without something that they call sin, which is really an archery term meaning missing the mark. You know, the identity, they say, of the criminal is not known. If there has been some type of crime and they haven't quite figured out who done it, if there has been some kind of mistaken identity, if you need to show somebody your passport because you were traveling, that does not say the wholeness, does not define who you are. If you need to know that you were growing up and establishing your identity, you may have perceived that that identity was necessary for you to be separate and apart from who your parents are or who your brothers or sisters were, so that you could be something that was special in your mind first and foremost, but also in the minds of those who met you. And so if you have ever felt that you lack an individual identity, it is an untruth. The fingerprints are never the same. The voice prints are never the same. Who you are is something very, very special. Now, what you need to know is that who you are, because you were created from this magnificence, you are part of a global family. You are part of everything that is. You are one with the mind that created electricity. You are one with the bird that woke you up with its singing this morning. You are one with the grass that's in your lawn. You're one with the flowers that are in your garden. You're one with the pigs that are out in the back of the farm. You're one with the cows, and you're one with the Muslims, and you're one with the Jews, and you're one with the Buddhists, and you're one with the Taoists, and you're one with the racists, and you're one with the sexists, and you're one with the homophobes, and you are one with everything that is. So, that might be a little uncomfortable for you because you've been maybe heretofore separating yourself from those people. They're not who I am. I am not a white person. I'm not a Latina person. I'm not an African American. I'm not a man. I'm not this. I'm not that. I am this. And even in your wildest imaginations, you cannot even begin to capture all of who you are. Colin Tippin, who is a wonderful, wonderful teacher of radical forgiveness, tells us the ego is an insidious, deep-seated, subconscious guilt complex based on our belief that we committed the original sin of separating from God, who will eventually punish us for doing so. The ego seeks every way possible to reinforce itself and block any attempt to reveal the truth that we never separated from God at all. It cleverly ensures its survival by protecting us from our overwhelming guilt as well as the fear of God's wrath through the mechanisms of repression and projection. That's some heavy stuff you're dealing with here. That's some major weight that you're carrying here. Oh my God. Some of the ways that we're showing up is because we think we've been condemned from birth. I never really bought into that, and I'm glad, because I mentioned this before. I remember being in the second grade when they were telling me that babies were going to go to purgatory because they had this immortals, this original sin, and it was like, that's not the God that I know. And so, but in this conditioning, in this path that's been taught to you through your religious leaders, through your teachers, even through your parents. And I know all of these people were well-meaning, but they really didn't have a clue if they were promoting this idea that was created from Augustine back in the Middle Ages, when they were trying to keep the spirituality to themselves and make everyone think that only the privileged people could be spiritual, and we'll let you know what you need to know when you need to know it. See, what the part of us that has never been hurt, harmed, nor endangered knows is that we are absolutely perfect. And if there's something that rubs up against you when I say that, move on. Get over it because you are. Get over it because you're whole. Get over it because you're complete. So any perception that you have about not having enough or not being enough is simply the lie, a lie, the father of all lies. Let me tell you what some of that lie has been doing to the consciousness and to the psychological state of us. It has actually made us think that the fathers who have left the families have been dealing with this guilt. They were told that they weren't enough. They were told that they were made from sin. And either the fathers who stayed, and they were trying so hard not to be like the aspects of themselves that separated, and it might have been outpictured through their own fathers. Their own fathers might have showed up in a certain way, and they didn't want to be like him. They didn't want to be the same kind of father. They wanted to make different choices. But that father, whoever he was, whose behavior was not approved of, was totally convinced, totally brainwashed, totally bought into this idea that he was a sinner and that he would always be a sinner and that he would always be separate from his good. And if we're walking around thinking that we're separate from God, it's a painful experience. I know what it is, because I know when I'm off my mark. I know when I'm feeling that I'm separate from God. Those are the empty moments. Those are the dark and painful moments of my life. Now, the aspect of the Father as source and substance will never leave you. The aspect of the Father that is your divine heritage will never want to leave you, will never ever want to forsake you. The presence of the Father wants to give you the kingdom. And the kingdom means that you get to be bountiful, you get to be healthy, you get to be happy, you get to be filled with love, you get to receive love, you get to give love abundantly. This Father sees you as beautiful. This Father sees you as creative and powerful. This Father sees you as magnificent. And in this awareness, I want you to know that to the degree that we are aware of who we truly are, we can never abandon ourselves. And that's a big one. Because if we have ever abandoned ourselves because we were ashamed of how we looked, because we were ashamed of what we thought, because we were ashamed of what we believed, because we were ashamed of how much money we didn't have, because we were ashamed of what our occupation was, because we were ashamed that we weren't talented enough, because we were ashamed that we didn't have enough education, because we were ashamed that we didn't have enough friends, because we were ashamed of whatever the nonsense was, none of it was ever true. And so what I want you to know is that in this awareness of the kingdom, there is everything that you could ever want and more. And when I came to an understanding of what that meant, that means that we have to take inventory of what our blessings are. We have to realize how good it is to be able to have clothes on our back, to be able to have a roof over our heads, to be able to have food to eat, to be able to have 5 fingers and toes, to be able to absolutely walk and talk and hear and see and breathe on our own and to know beyond the senses and beyond the physical world that there's a whole nother life energy that is going on in our mental body, that there are subtle bodies and etheric selves and Atman presence that is within us, and so many dimensions of our being. In my Father's house, there are many mansions. These are the many dimensions of you in your Father's house. You are a house of God. And so in this kingdom, you are absolutely assured of everything. And that part of you that says, but not me, because I'm not worthy. That is the part that we get to love more. That is the part that we get to direct our compassion to. That is the aspect of ourselves that we get to nourish and nurture. That is the aspect of ourselves that we get to hold and rock. That is the aspect of ourselves that we get to be kind to treat, to naps and vacations. And my wonderful leadership council sent me to the spa last Saturday, and I spent hours and hours and hours in it. And there's a wonderful way that we get to be kind to ourselves so that we don't abandon ourselves. Because whenever we abandon ourselves, we cannot help but abandon others. Whenever we are separate from who we are as our essence, we can't even stand to be in our own skin, let alone around anybody else. And anything that we have repressed that has made us sad, whether it was the loss of a relationship, the loss of whatever it might be, the loss or the change in your circumstances, the change in your worship place, the change in your leadership, whatever it is that you have been repressing, whatever it is that you have been projecting because you don't like it within yourself, you get to really be with yourself in that. You get to really be with yourself in love. Because another aspect of the ego is that job of lovingly finding all sorts of ways to find the pain of separation. I spoke of it early in the month when I talked about it being part of the Bhagavad Gita, how the wonderful, the play of coming back into reunion, the wonderful joy and the wonderful bliss that comes with reuniting with yourself is a great way for you to know this. So we have all of these wonderful games that we've set up, like the Voting Rights Act. We've got this wonderful game that we've set up so that we can feel separate. What in the world is she talking about? That Voting Rights Act that we didn't realize had an expiration date on it. That Voting Rights Act that said, well, you know, this state, the certain states are going to have to do some pre-screening before they allow these certain people to be able to vote. And we're appalled. Oh my God, how dare you treat me different than someone else? How dare you make another obstacle after all of these years that we've worked and all of the protests that we've had and all of the boycotts that we've done and all of the vigils that we've had and all of those who were murdered for the sake of it. What about the freedom fighters, the black ones and the white ones, and what about the people who were lynched because they wanted to have an opportunity to have their voice heard? And you start to see yourself as separate from those people who are trying to do something to you that is painful, and you start to see yourself separate from your good. You start to see yourself as being denied of your good. You start to see yourself as being absolutely kept at a distance from the fullness of your life and the fullness of your joy. And you start to concoct all of these ideas about how you can get back at these people for what they have done to you. And you start to think about how you can overcome this sense of being made to feel separate because it wasn't them that could make you think anything. it is who you think you are that makes the difference. If you are a gay person such as myself, I have to say that every once in a while because people say, I didn't know that, but I don't talk about it every day. But it's definitely applicable. I mean, for me to think about the things that occurred this week, if I had thought about them when I was in my practitioner training 10, 11 years ago, and I was crying to the depth of my being, wailing to the top of my voice because of the homophobia, because of the sexism, and because of the racism that I had experienced in my life for 4 more decades, all of those feelings of self-hatred came up to be purged and released because I was no longer willing to buy into somebody else's idea of who I was. So all of those times that I was rejected, and all of those times that I felt like I didn't get to because somebody wanted something other than who I was, or I didn't have because somebody else wanted to make sure that I didn't have, or somebody else decided it wasn't for a woman to do, or somebody else said it wasn't for a black person to have, or somebody else said that it wasn't for a gay person to be able to be a parent, or to be able to be married, or to be in a relationship. And all of these things that these people were saying to me, I had accepted as truth. They might have been facts, hello, but they were not truths. So we get to substitute the facts for real truth. We get to substitute the facts for real truth. Wendy Davis. Started at 11 o'clock in the morning. Good God Almighty. She started at 11 o'clock in the morning. She was not permitted to have a sip of water like I just did. She wasn't permitted to have food breaks. She wasn't permitted to go to the bathroom until this thing was over at midnight. And it did not detain her from being able to be present to truth. She had been a mother, a working mother. She had been a person who was in politics for quite a long time. She had been truly a backer of the Planned Parenthood. She had her home firebombed because of her association with them. She had decided that this SB 5 bill that was going to close 37 clinics and leave hundreds of thousands of women in Texas and the neighboring states like Oklahoma with no way to make a choice about themselves. And all of the different obstacles that were placed before these women so that they would reconsider is not without merit. One mustn't take life lightly. However, to tell a woman that you're going to dictate to her what she must do and what she cannot do is not something that any man would permit. And so Wendy stood there for all of those hours, and with the support of her colleagues, not the least of which was this wonderful Latina woman who came up and says, at what point does a female senator have to raise her hand or have her voice heard in the midst of the male colleagues? And I'm paraphrasing, but that sent out an eruption from the hundreds of people who were there, because she knew at the very essence of her being that there was no difference between the male congressman and the female congressman. There was no difference from the male senators and the female senators. And there was a sense that everyone in that moment was celebrating that oneness. There was a sense that everyone knew that the truth had overwhelmingly suppressed the facts and the lies of separation. We get to think that when we get things like Proposition 8 reversed, that this is something to celebrate, and it is, because it's a celebration of oneness. And I want you to know that you are responsible for all of these things happening this week. I want you to know that your consciousness of oneness, your commitment to oneness, made all of these things possible this week. The overturning of Proposition 8, the overturning of SB 5, the overturning of DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act. What do you know about the defense of marriage? I won't get started. I won't get started because you don't know what it means when you're not permitted to go into the hospital room of your beloved because you're told that you're not a relative. You don't know what it means to be put out of the house that you built together with your beloved, that you could not marry because their relatives decided that your relationship was invalid. You do not understand what it means to know that you got to maybe sometimes choose your employment based on whether or not they will cover a domestic spouse, and maybe your very financial and economic welfare is on the line because of the partner that you had no control about loving. What is that defending? It's not defending love. Love needs no defending. But it is defending the right to lives. And so what we said this week, we said it to Paula D. We said, no, your lies are no longer acceptable. We said that your way of thinking and yearning for the days when you can have some folks dressed up in tuxedos serving you are over. You get to understand that Paula Dean is not a horrible person. I was joking with someone I was working with this week, and I said, I is what I is, to quote a friend. And they're like, what friend? I'm like, oh, Paula Dean. Oh, she's a horrible person. And this is a white person talking. I said, oh, no, Paula Dean is the best thing that ever happened this week. Paula Dean outed a whole group of people who were hiding behind their hatred and pretending that they didn't feel separate. Paula Dean outed a whole group of people who were pretending to be accepting and pretending to be in oneness. She outed a whole group of people so that we would absolutely be able to see, no, you don't get to keep your job. No, you don't get to keep those endorsements. No, you don't get to keep doing those commercials. No, you don't get to keep talking this way. No, you don't get to keep profiting at the benefit of others' suppression. And I know that Jimmy Carter is right when he asks us to forgive her, because she does need to forgive herself. And if we can facilitate that healing process, then we know that there are times when we talked about people from another race. Breathe! There are times when we called them disparaging names. Breathe. There are times when we thought that they should be acting in a certain way and that they were not acting. Breathe. There were certain stereotypes that we had inflicted on them that we thought that they should wear. Breathe. There are certain ways that we get to have an opportunity to come back into oneness. We get an opportunity to forgive ourselves for those thoughts that we thought about those other ethnic groups. We get to forgive ourselves for those thoughts that we thought about those God-forsaken gay people. We get to look at ourselves and say, you know what? I want my happiness, but it does not have to come at the cost of somebody else's freedom. It does not have to come at the expense of someone else's well-being. Paula Dean is being punished for her behavior and for her mindset because she was perceived to be insensitive. So as you forgive, and before you can even begin to forgive Paula Dean, forgive yourself for the ways in which you have been insensitive. Forgive yourself for the ways in which you have not accepted someone else. See, you don't have to compare yourself with anyone else. Who they are does not make you any greater. Who they are does not make you any lesser than who you are. You do not need to criticize, judge, look down, or satirize something that you feel separate from. Because that very idea of being separate from them is a lie. You are not separate from them. But it is an invitation for you to see what there is in you that you have not accepted. It's an invitation for you to have a healing. It's an invitation for you to come truly into your wholeness. And if you are in pain, find another way to alleviate your pain rather than attacking another. Please do not focus on her insensitivity without exploring your own insensitivity. You do not get to project on me who you think I am. I do get to let you know who I am. If I'm black and proud, I carry myself accordingly. If I have gay pride, I may or may not wave a flag. My real coup is being good with me, just as I am. Ernest Holmes says, all nature waits on man's recognition of and cooperation with her laws, and is always ready to obey his will. But man must use nature's forces in accordance with her laws and in cooperation with her purpose, which is goodness, truth, and beauty, if he wishes to attain self-mastery. No matter what may be in the subjective side of our thoughts, the conscious state can change it. That's what treatment does. So we get to consciously know that there is no inherited tendency toward limitation. It's not part of our genetic makeup. It's not part of our spiritual DNA. There's no race suggestion operating through subjectivity. A race doesn't mean a particular race, it means the human race. Anything that anyone has ever thought in the history of all mankind, womankind, humankind, is race thought. No race suggestion operating through subjectivity. Nothing in, around, or through us that believes in or accepts limitation as our truth in any way, shape, or form. So, when you affirm that you are a child of the abundant universe, you really need to let yourself feel that. In all the abundant ways that the universe is conspiring for your good, even when it feels not so good. Your kingdom is rich. You are deserving of being in this kingdom because it was created for you. I can identify myself as a feminist, as an artist, as a lesbian, as an intellectual, as an advocate, as a woman, as a black woman. Most importantly, I can identify myself as a spiritual being and a light worker. That does not automatically make me anti-men, anti-hetero, anti-ghetto, or anti-white. It does mean that I am human. And as a human, my job is to be humane. I may or may not be good at my job at any given time. I may not show you how caring or kind that I am in certain moments. I may or may not be gentle in my expressions in each time that you see me. I may do humanitarian acts, or I may choose to be selfish. I may fall short of being compassionate or even being benevolent. I may act civilized or uncivilized. I may be more charitable at times than others, sometimes than others. But that doesn't give you the authority to be cruel to me. That doesn't give you permission to judge me. All you need to know is that my intention is to love, and my life is lived in service to love. And I invite you to know that for yourself. I invite you to know that you are this wonderfully beloved in whom God is well pleased. And I invite you to see the beloved everywhere that you go. It is in the animals, and it is in you. It is in the wind and in the earth. It is in the water, and it is in the light. It is the very spirit that breathes you. It is the Father's presence. Honor it, embrace it, cherish it. Namaste.
Namaste.